Okay, guys, we're going to go through some of chapter 5, 6, and 7, and we're going to review just some basic arrays, loops, and creating our own methods. So first, let's just start off by creating an array, and just an int array, and we can just have this be int list. And if it's an array, you need to make sure you have brackets there. And first of all, there are two different ways to create an array. You can use the brackets and then a semicolon, and you can fill the array with numbers. And we have 5 elements in the array: 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Along with this, this is in location 0, location 1, location 2, 3, and 4. So there are 5 elements in this array, but every array, as you should know, starts at 0 and it goes up to the end of the array. But if we want to fill the array, we can also, since array is actually a set of objects, just like in Greenfoot how you do new and you want to create a new object, you can create a new object called list of the int type, and you can make it 5 empty elements in our array. So now we have 5 empty elements in our array, and if we did sysout system.out.println, and then we did list, and we wanted to find a certain location in the array. Let's say we wanted to find the last element in the array. We could do system.out.print list 4, and I have not created a main method class here, so I need to make sure I do that. So public static void main args string args, and we want, okay, and so now we have our main method and we have our list that is created, that is 5 empty. But if we ran this, these would all be value of 0. Okay, and so if I ran this, this will show up as 0. But if I wanted to fill this array, it's very important that you guys, for your final, you're going to know how to fill an array. So this is very common with arrays, is learning how to fill the array. And so we can just set up a basic loop. In this loop, in I equals 0, I is less than list.length. Now this is the most important part, is this list.length. This just gets the length of the array, and essentially it's starting at element 0 and going all the way up to element 4, to the length of the array, which is 5. And then it's going to grab each location in the array. And so I plus plus. So let's say within this loop we have we have list I. Okay, and so now within this loop, I will represent 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4, because it's less I, well, I is less than 5. If you did less than or equal to 5, it would be too large, an array would be out of bounds. So we want to do less than 5. So we could really replace this with 5, but if we wanted to change the length of our array, then we would run into some issues. Okay? And so what we're going to do next is we are going to fill the array with the value 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And so list I is like I said, is the elements in the array. So list at 0. If I plugged in 0, that would be the first time through the loop. Then I plugged in 1, that would be the second time through the loop. And so that would grab different locations in our array. And up here, there is all of them equal 0. So no matter what I plugged in, it would be 0. Okay, but down here, I have set location 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4 all equal to I, which is the same number, 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So if I did system.out.println list I, that will give you oh, what is it? So if I do outside of my array system.out.print line list at 4 after the array gets filled, oh, okay, so I've realized that my public static void main is ended. My main method is ended right here. That is because I've not, so when I tried to do that inside of the array, excuse me, inside of the loop, my curly brackets were off, and I need to make sure that my curly brackets are correct, and you need to make sure that you do a Command Shift or a Control Shift F so that your formatting gets corrected, and so this will now still be in our loop. And if we switch this to I now, that it's actually set up inside of the loop, and then this is set up all inside of the main method. Now when I do the print, it will print 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so now our array is filled with just the value of I, which is 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So these are the elements 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 filled with the same number that is also the element that it is talking about, because list I equals I. Okay, but let's say we want to, instead of setting our value of list equal to I, if we want to create a scanner, scanner input equals new scanner system.in, setting up our scanner, we need to import a scanner as well, import java.util.scanner. Now when we do list I, we might want to do input.next int. Okay, so now when we run it, it will ask for our input, and we can input numbers, and they will be saved. I accidentally did letters there. So they will be saved within our list. Okay, and then so if we took this out and we just chose, oh, what's list at our fourth, or excuse me, our fifth part, our fifth element in the array. So remember, since it starts at 0, list at element location 4 is actually the fifth number that we're going to plug in. So if I plugged in some numbers, 45, 55, 66, 34, 23, and 99, 99 will be the what gets printed out, because that is the fifth location in our array. Okay, So if we don't know how many elements we want yet, like I was talking about earlier, we might create a variable. So int, let's say we have a number of elements variable, and we don't know what it equals. We'll set it equal to input dot next int. And then instead of our list being filled, we can have our list be filled with number of elements. And then whatever we plug in here for number of elements will be the length of our list array. And then since we have our for loop set up correctly, instead of plugging in 5 here, this can be plugged in and it will be the same as number of elements. So we could replace number of elements and really just put it right here in this scenario. But now we can plug in the total number of elements in the array, which is 10. So that'll be the number of elements. So the length of our list now is 10. And then it will ask us to, now since our length is 10, it'll ask us to fill the array 10 different times with 10 numbers. Okay, so I'll do 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And so it will say list at the 5th element in the array. So 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, and 6 will be printed. Okay, so a good example of when we're going to do this is if we had a list of scores. So if we change the name of our array to scores and we make it a double, and then we do a new double array, our scores dot length will now be the length of the array, and it will be scores I equals input dot next, and up here the number of elements is a whole number, but the values for scores cannot be an int value. It needs to be double, next double. And then so list should be scores. And so now if in this scenario we wanted to, like I've explained in class, if we wanted to have a program that is trying to get student score, and I'm trying to get the 5th student score, or maybe I'm trying to print all the scores. Okay, let's say I'm just trying to print all the scores. And I want to print them separately, so I'm going to do another for loop int, and since this int I is within this loop, if we go outside of this loop, I no longer exists. I is local to just the loop that it has. So I could do int I again if I wanted to and do the same exact setup. And then I could do system.out.print scores I, and this would print all the scores. Are my curly brackets correct? Yes, this one covers this one. This one should cover the main method, and this one should cover the class. Yes, it does. Okay, so we need to input the number of elements. So let's say we have 5. Okay, and then we want our elements to be, our scores need to be, all right, so student 1 got a 99.9%. Student 2 got a 89.9%. Student 3 got a 78%. Student 4 got a 65.5%, 65.6. And then student 5 got an 88.8%. Okay, then it will print every single student's scores. Okay, so that is some of the basics of creating an array, filling an array, as well as printing the array at the end. So let's say we wanted to grab the best score out of all of these. So instead of just printing these scores, we need to create a variable of best, and to start, best doesn't equal anything. Best could actually equal 0 because we know the best will be better than 0. So we can throw in 0 if we want to. Instead, and since this is outside of the for loops, we can access it within the for loops. But if we put it in a different method, it will not be able to access it in a different method. We would need to move best up here to the top, okay? And so let's go ahead and move all of these elements, cut and paste them outside of the main method. Actually, we're going to leave them in the main method. We're going to do everything in the main method to start. Okay, so now instead of printing all these scores, we're going to find the best score and only print the best score. So what we need to do is we need to do a if statement. If best is less than scores dot scores I, we need to set best equal to scores I, so that this loop will happen the length of the array once again, so over all the way through the entire array. That concept is vital for your final, the 6-7 test, and just going forward in programming, is understanding that a lot of times you're going to need to find every single element in an array and later on in a string as well. And so here I can plug in 3 scores. One's 55, and then a 99, and then a 78. Okay, and that'll give us best needs to be print out. So we do that again. 3, 66, 99, 77. So 99 is the one that gets saved as best, no matter where it is put in, because 99 is greater than the previous score. So score starts at 0, so 0 would be the first element in the array. And 66 is greater than 0, so best is less than scores. Actually, for logic purposes, I would probably do this reverse for my own understanding. If it makes more sense the other way for you, then that's fine, but I would want to check each score and check if that score is greater than the previous best. And so every time through this array, best could be reset. So the first time, 66 is greater than 0, what best was previously. So best now equals 66. Second time through the loop, I becomes 1, so scores at 1. So it would be 99. 99 is greater than 66, so best equals 99. Then the third time through the loop, I will be 2, and I at 2 is 77. 77 is not greater than 99, so this if statement would skip, and the best would get printed out. Okay, so now you really know how to check what's going on in the array and check which one is best. You could do which one is least. You might have to do some creative programming to figure out if half is above the average, kind of like our practice test, and things like that. You'd have to get creative with your if statement to make that happen. Okay, so now that we've talked about arrays, I'm going to go on and we're going to talk a little bit about loops. And so in our test problem, we wanted to create something that showed up 1, 1, 3, 1, 3, 5, 1, 3, 5, 7, 1, 3, 5, 7, dot, 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 n, whatever gets plugged in for n. Now that's what the test 6-7 test problem asked. So I'm not going to do that exactly, but let's say we wanted to have a loop that just did 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 4, 2, 2, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then as long, whatever we plug in for n. Okay, and so we would need to create a new method here. And so public static void display pattern, and we're going to need to plug something in for n. So we're going to need what we call passing a parameter. So we need to have an int get thrown in there because we need n to be whatever the user decides to get thrown in. And remember that this n is just representative. It could be called whatever, okay? And it is just whatever gets thrown in within the display pattern method. This SDFFAEF would just represent the value that gets plugged in when we call it in the main method. Okay, and so let's change that back to n for now. And we'll talk about that more in a second. So if we wanted to create an input, we're going to need an input for n anyway. So let's go ahead and create that. Scanner input equals new scanner system.in. And now we're going to have an int number equals input.nextInt. So we're going to plug in the number for n. And this is what I've talked about all semester about breaking down the problem and just first doing what you know you need to do. And so in order to do that, we need to plug in a number for n. And then when we do call this display pattern, we need to plug in a number for that location. But we could also display pattern, and I've misspelled pattern in my method, so that won't work for now, but we could display pattern and we could just plug in any old number that we want in there once we change this to pattern. And so we'll see, compare what display pattern 10 looks like no matter what, if it's 10, and display pattern number, whatever we enter in for number. Okay, and so if we just simply did system.out.print line n, it will grab whatever number gets plugged in and it will print it. And so if we put in 50, it would print the 50, and it would also print just the 10 on its own there. But we want to display the 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and so with this, you need to look at the patterns that are given. And so first of all, the pattern that we see most evident is this 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're going to count up to whatever n is. So we know that we are going to need to make a loop because this is happening over and over and over again all the way up until n. And so int I equals 0, I is less than, and what is I in this pattern of like counting up, this individual one line pattern? What is I going up to? Well, we know it's going up to, first it only goes up to 1, then it goes up to 1, 2, then it goes up to 1, 2, 3, then it goes up to 1, 2, 3, 4, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So for me, visually, I like to think of, well, what's the last loop doing? And so just to start off, just to print this last loop, because I don't really, let's pretend I really don't know where to start. So I just would plug n in here, and then I would do I plus plus. And this will not give us our final answer, but it will give us a place to start. And that's always important, is to be making progress. And in this example, every time through the loop, am I creating a new line? No. This inner loop, this first loop, just to make 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 all the way up to n, is not. So what we are going to do is we're just going to do system.out.print, and we're going to do I, and then plus space, and then a semicolon. Now our I starts at 0, and that I already can tell that that's going to be a problem. Our I should start at 1 because we are starting at 1 with this loop, and we want to go all the way to n. So we're going to do our last part of this first, just to get us going and just to get a start. And so just in case we're going to use more than one line on this, which I don't think we're going to have to, I'm going to do curly brackets. And so when we run this, we need to plug in a number for display pattern to start for number, for the number of, basically the number of times this loop is going to happen here. And so if I put 20 in, it would do 1 through 20, excuse me, 1 through 19, because it starts at 1 and it goes all the way up to 19. And then it prints 10. And since there's no print line, it'll print 1 through 9 right after it. And so essentially we have this 1 through 5. So if I did it again and I just put in, let's say n was, let's say we just needed to get to 6 here. Okay, and we'll ignore this n. So if I plugged in 6 for my number, I'd get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, not quite to 6, and then I'd do, since 10 is plugged in here, I think you guys understand that, that'll get 1 through 9 there. So I'm going to take that out. Okay, so now we're getting 1 through 9. We want it also to equal to n. So this less than needs to change to a less than or equal to in order for us to do that. And if we plug in 6 here now, it'll get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that last line is already made. So that's great. Now, the other pattern that's happening, and we're going to have to change this a little bit, but I need to walk you guys through that. So this other pattern that's happening is that we're only printing 1, and then we're printing 1, 2, and then we're printing 1, 2, 3. But it's, you can see it's going to a new line, and there's a second pattern that's happening that it's slowly increasing. And so for me that's telling me I'm going to need another for loop. And we're going to need to set a new variable to it, and we can start it at 1, since our 1 is matching up with the number of lines that there are. When there's one line, we just want one element. So I can start at 1 here. And then j, well, j is less than or equal to, well, how many times do we want this new line? How many lines do we want? Well, if we plugged in 1, we would just want 1 line. If we plugged in 2, we'd just want 2. If we plugged in 6, we'd want 1, 2, 3, 4, and then with a 5, we'd want 5, and then one more line, we'd want 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so we want the same number of lines as we do whatever gets plugged in for our n, or in this case, our number. So this is actually what is going to need to equal n, because that will always be the case. We will always plug in the same number of lines as we do whatever gets plugged in. So we want j to go all the way up to however many n is. And then we'll have j plus plus, and I know every time after I print I'm going to do a formatting, and I'm going to do curly bracket, because I know this is a loop within a loop, because our inner loop, this one, is going to print our list of numbers, and our outer loop, I know that is the second thing. After we print all of our numbers, the second thing I want to have happen is print a new line. So right now we're just printing I, and before we had this loop, we just printed I all in one series. But now we want to do, outside of this loop, we want to do just print a line that is empty. And what this will do is have it print this loop the same number of times as whatever we plug in for n. So if we once again plug in 6, I will print 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 lines with 6 elements of I getting printed. Now I've noticed that there's an issue. Now the issue, is it in the inner loop or is it in the outer loop, is what we need to figure out. So I did another formatting, and you'll see it lines it up a little bit better, the for loop, the outer for loop, and then the inner for loop here. And so I noticed that the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the inner loop is what's having the problem. The outer loop that's printing the new lines, it's printing 6 lines, so that's exactly what we want. So the inner loop is where the problem's at. So take a second to try to figure out, what is the problem? Where is this issue happening? And I'll tell you, the issue is happening that the I is going all the way up to 6 every time, and we just want I to go to 1, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4, and then 5, and then 6. And so our I, this inner loop is happening too many times the first time. And then too many times the second, and it doesn't happen the right amount of time until the very last time through. And so what I know is happening is that there is a variable that is changing, and there needs to be a variable that changes every single time to change how many times this I is happening. Right now this I is happening all the way up until n times, whatever we plug in for n. But we just want it to happen once, the first time on the first line, then twice on the second line, and then 3 times on the third line, 4 times on the fourth line, 5 times on the fifth line, 6 times on the sixth line. So when we create a new line, what is changing every time we create a new line? Because that's the variable in our problem, is that when we have one line, we want just I to print once. Then when we have 2 lines, we want I to print twice. Well, in our outer loop, that is what's changing. J changes every time a line gets printed. So that is the variable that changes every time an entire line happens. And so if we simply change n to j, well, j is 1 the first time through the loop, because that is our first line. And so I is 1 if 1 is less than or equal to 1 the first time through the outer loop, it'll print I, and then it'll exit the inner loop because I is 1, j is 1, and then when I turns to 2 the second time through the inner loop, 2 is not less than or equal to 1, so it'll exit that loop and print a line, and then it'll go back up to the top of the outer loop. And then j is 2, and so I will print twice, then exit the loop and print a new line. And then j will be 3, and then so the third time through the loop, j will be 3, so I will print 3 times. Fourth time through the loop, I will print 4 times, and then we have our answer. So if we print 6, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. So j increases as it goes down, and so if you ever have a question, which you will on the test, of a pyramid that gets created, and something along these lines of like a pyramid of growing numbers, you need to notice the pattern and then the patterns within the pattern. So I know that might be difficult to understand, but you can really see at the very last line. That's why we started with that, how this inner loop pattern is functioning. And so that's why we created this first. Then we needed to figure out how this outer loop pattern worked of printing a new line and when it printed a new line and how we need to change I every time we print a new line. Okay? And so from now on, when we are changing this, we need to look at the inner loop and how the inner loop is working, and also then how the outer loop is working and how that affects what we're printing out. Okay, and so you can manipulate these numbers starting at 1, or you could start at 2, and we could just print even numbers if we started at 2. And normally we do plus plus here, but we don't always have to do that. You could do plus equals 2 and plus equals 2. And then how would that change our loop? Well, if we plugged in 8, it would print 2, and then 2, 4, and then 2, 4, 6, and then 2, 4, 8. Let's say we just did plus plus here. Well, our loop would start at 2, and then j would be 2 to start off, so just 2 would print. Then j would move up to 4, so 2 would print, I would only plus 1, and then 3, so I would print 2, and then 3, and then also 4, because j goes up to 4. So if I did this, this would not look exactly like a pyramid, but it would be 2, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, all the way through 10, through 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. So you can see how this pattern works. But it's not really the question, it's just how do I manipulate the inner loop and the outer loop, and recognizing how this inner loop and outer loop works can also help you figure out problems. So let's try doing it the opposite way. So we're just plus-plussing we're just plus-plussing j, the outer loop, and with the inner loop we're adding 2 to it. So we're in this one where it stretched out really long. Now I know it's going to stretch down really far, and we're going to be printing new lines more often. So we're going to print 2, and then let's just see what happens here. Okay, so if I run this and I plug in 10, it'll print 2, and then I will be 2, which 2 is less than or equal to j, so I will print 2. Then I'll exit the loop, print a new line, and j will become 3, and I at 2. 2 is less than or equal to 3, so it'll print I, and then I will plus 2. Excuse me. So I will then be 4, and 4 is not less than or equal to the 3 the second time through the outer loop. And so you can see how the pattern does change, but the key is to understand how to manipulate this loop as opposed to what's going on, as opposed to just staring at the problem and really not knowing what to change and how to test and figure out how to make this work. You need to understand how the inner loop and the outer loop function. Okay? So lastly, what I want to do is I'm going to input a string. So I'm going to erase display pattern. And I'm going to count the number of letters in a string. So I'm going to do string text input dot next line. Okay, and then I'm going to create public static void. I'm actually going to return an int instead of void. So we're going to change the method type. So we're going to return an int that is going to count lowercase. Now, in order to count lowercase letters, we're going to enter a text, a line, and we're going to count the lowercase letters within that line. And in order to do that, we need to give this method something. So if we're passing, what we call passing a method, if we're going to count the lowercase and then we're going to return the number of lowercase letters, we're going to need to pass a string to this. And it doesn't matter, like I said, it doesn't necessarily matter what you call it. And now I have too many curly brackets. Okay. Okay, so it needs to return an int. So we are going to create a loop for int I equals 0, and we need to know that 0 is the start of any array, and a string is really an array of characters, so you need to be aware of that. Okay, so we're going to do while I is less than s dot length, similar to our array dot length, whatever our array name dot length. We're going to do s dot length, which will grab all. It's actually a method that will grab all of the characters of s, and it'll tell us how long that is. And so this is essentially going through each letter of an array, starting with 0, which would be the first letter, and going all the way to the last letter. And so then we'll do I. We're just going to do plus plus, because I needs to go through not every other letter, so it wouldn't be plus equals 2 or anything like that. It is just going to be plus plus. So within this loop, we need to get our s, and we're going to take the string that we have, and we're going to say find our location within our character location. So if we take the string, there is a char at function, and we need to check every element of the array. So this will check every element of the array, and we are going to need to count. We're going to need to create a variable for count and say int count will start as 0. And let's just count the number of letters to start off in the array. So s.charat will grab every letter, and if s.charat does not equal null, let's try this out. I haven't tried this. Um, so the checking if s.char@, is a lowercase letter, um, I will need to go into a character class and do a check if lowercase. So if s.char@ I is a lowercase, we need to find that is lowercase. So we have to open up a character class. So Java, in the Java library, we have a pre-made character class, and that'll help us out. And we have a whole bunch: is alphabetic, is defined, is digit, yada yada yada, is lowercase, and we're not gonna have an integer. We're gonna use a char. So you can even search through with it finishing out, but we're going to do character dot is lowercase, and then it says it needs a character to plug in between those parentheses. So we're going to give it a character, but not just one character. We're going to give it all the characters of the string. And then we have parenthesis, 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 one more. Okay. And so we have a count that we need to create and make sure that it is counting the number of lowercase letters. And then so if character dot is lowercase of the s, the string that we give it, so that'll be text. So we're going to do in our method, we're going to do in our method call, we're going to do count lowercase of text. So that's what we're going to be plugging in. Okay, and then if character dot is lowercase s.char@ I, which will start off at 0, the 0 location, then the 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up until it's s.length, so every single letter within the string that we give it. And it will count all the lowercase letters. But this is having an error because we need to, if we have an int return type, it needs to return an integer no matter what. So we're going to return, what do we return? S? No. Do we return I? No. That won't be available outside the loop, and I would just be the inside the loop. I would just be the length of the string, so we don't want to return that, or s.length. No, that would just be the length. We want to return the count, which would be the total number of lowercase letters that we find. So if we left our method like this, it would store a number, an int number in there, but it would not print anything because we have not asked, it's not a void type of like display and print it. It is just going to return a number. So, I mean, we could store a variable in there, but we don't, that's kind of a waste of time. We can just print the number of lowercase letters that we count for text, and we can go from there. So we did it. Okay, so it counts the lowercase. It goes through every single one of these. The W, uppercase. The E, lowercase. D, uppercase. So 1 lowercase, 2 lowercase, 3 lowercase, and 4 lowercase, and then 4 exclamation points. Okay, and let's really, I'm going to really remind you and review on how this works in your own brain, and you need to think of this conceptually while you're programming. In your brain, yeah, you can see E is obviously lowercase, I, D, and T are all lowercase, so it's easy to count in your head 4 lowercase letters. But what you're doing really rapidly is checking each letter, just like in our programming, and saying, oh, the first letter, which is I at 0, S, the string that we plugged in, char at 0, that would be the W, so if I plugged in 0 for that, it would just check W. That would not be lowercase, so count would not go up. So in our head, we would not count that as a lowercase letter. Then we'd go to the next letter. E, yes, that's lowercase. Capital D, no, that's not lowercase. I is lowercase. D is lowercase. capital I is not, T is lowercase, the exclamation points are not lowercase. So we counted 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay? So when you're going through some of these problems, you need to be thinking how in your own head, how are you thinking of how to do it? And then after that, try to figure out with, hopefully this has helped with understanding exactly how to think through these loops. Figuring out how is the computer going to be able to do this for me? Okay, so please really go rewind and look through this if you have any concepts that you're struggling on. If you're trying to figure out how to do something, whether for the 6-7 test or going forward to the final or going through the practice final, please review this, and this hopefully will give you a good start. And I will see you guys again on Monday, and we can work through this stuff on Monday. All right? All right, have a good one, guys. I'm sorry I'm gone. I'm hoping this will help you guys review and prepare for the final without me there. Okay, so please work hard and prepare for the final. We'll prepare Monday, Tuesday, and then have the final, let's see, that'd be Thursday of next week. See you then.